Hi Gordon. This morning we're going to change the water pump on a 300D turbo engine. It's the same on a 300D and a 240D. The water pump is in the front, right in the front of the engine, and I'm about to take this car on a trip. And if the water pump goes out, it's a showstopper. That would be hard to find in the middle of the desert on the highway, and so I just want to change it. This car's got 170,000 miles on it. It should have been changed a long time ago. I can't find in the car's records from the previous owner where it's been done, so I want to do it. A lot of times you'll find that they start to will seep a little bit, and I think this one may even be doing that because I'm losing just a tiny bit of water. It takes several months, but I can't figure out exactly where it's going, and I don't get any puddles under the car, so I think the water pump could be seeping a little bit and then it evaporates. At any rate, what we've done is we've pulled the radiator out of the car. It just makes it a lot easier to work on. It only takes about 15 minutes to get a radiator out, and it's so much easier. You don't, chop your arms all up with that fan shroud working around it. We've also taken the air breather off because what we're going to have to do is loosen these belts on this alternator, and there's a bolt to this alternator in back that we need to loosen up in order to loosen the belts. We don't need any real special tools to do this at all. By the way, the water pump is right there, and here's the water pump we're going to put in it. The water pump is right down here, right behind the fan, and the new water pump, maybe you can get on that number. This is the number that we're putting in there. And these are really, really quality water pumps that Mercedes makes. I don't know another automobile where they'll last so long. I recommend about 100,000 miles and just change it, whether it's leaking or not, just because, as I said, if it does start to leak, it's a real showstopper. This is the water pump we're going to put in it, and it's brand new, and of course what it's got is a seal and a bearing in there, and make sure you get the gasket that goes with the water pump. Oops, I dropped it. But so you need a new gasket and a water pump. Now you don't need any special tools except one, and what you need is, if I have it out here, let's see what I do right here. Oh, and by the way, before I get to these tools, we've got the valve cover off of this because we're doing another job at the same time, but it's not required to change the water pump at all. All you have to do to start is to pull the air breather and to pull the radiator, and once you do that, you can get to the water pump. Now, I mentioned special tools. You really only need one, and I really recommend that you do this. Take a 10mm wrench and grind off the edges of the box end. The bolts that hold this fan on are in a real tight spot. You can get the open end on there, but you'll round them off more than likely. You can get them on there. These are the ones. But if you don't use the box end, you'll round the bolts off, and they're in a really nasty spot. And then if you round them off, you've really got a lot of trouble. Now, if you happen to have a flare nut wrench, you may think that's great, but it won't work. It's too big. A normal flare nut wrench is too thick that way to get on those bolts. You may get it on there, but you can't work it around in there. So what you really need to do is take and file or grind down a 10mm, and we want to loosen those up, and I'll just do that now before we loosen the fan belts, because the thing has a tendency to turn, obviously, and they're tight. So what we want to do is loosen all four of these bolts. And of course, it's the four bolts that go into the hub of the water pump that I'm loosening up. There's two. See, I loosen them up with a box end, and then I'm okay to use the open end on them, but I just don't want to start with the open end and round them off. Every Mercedes mechanic I know has one of these wrenches that's ground off. So there's three. Now the disadvantage is that when you don't loosen those up, you always end up with one of them in a nasty spot on bottom, but still, you can see that when the fan's still tight, when the belts are still tight, I can loosen these bolts
That one is a booger. This last one is only pretty tight. And of course it's on the bottom, but I'd much rather deal with that than have the thing turning on me with the fan belts loose.
Okay, I got those 3 top ones loose. I usually leave the last one in there, maybe a little loose, but maybe I didn't get it quite loose enough. The point is that it'll pivot on that one, and so you don't have to be so concerned with getting the last one out of there. So to fight 3 of them out of there is certainly better than 4. It does have to be a little looser maybe than I've got it so far, but nonetheless, I think you can see my point, that it'll rest on that. So the 3 bolts, of course, just came out with it, and so I don't lose them, I'll set them aside. Okay, now what I want to do, I'll have to take this one out, but I'm going to leave it in there just for a minute. And I'm going to loosen the alternator. Now the top is a 13 millimeter, and then there are 2 17 millimeter pivot bolts, and let me show you where they are. The pivot bolts are down in here. One of them is right behind the alternator, right there. And that actually tightens it up, and the alternator's got a swivel on that bolt. And then underneath it, there's another bolt that holds the alternator in, and we're going to loosen it too, just so the alternator will pivot and the belts will loosen up. So let's go loosen that one up. Okay, we want to loosen the alternator so that we can get the belts loose to get the water pump off. There's 1 bolt underneath. We just need to loosen it up. We don't need to take it out of there. It's a 17 millimeter, and it comes in from the back. So we just want that alternator to pivot so that those belts will come loose, and that's probably loose enough. So now we go back up top and loosen that tightening bolt. Okay, so the bolt that tightens the alternator up, that cinches those belts up, is right here, and as you can see, the alternator belts are getting loose as I back that off, and what I need to do is get them loose enough to get those belts all the way off the pulleys. As soon as I get the belts off the pulleys, I'll be in good shape. Okay, so I got them loose enough. Just take them off. What we want to do is get them out of the way and take that last bolt off, and we will have exposed the water pump there. Now we can just pull that water pump right off. Okay. When you pull that first bolt out, you're going to have antifreeze all over the place because of course the engine block is draining, and so that bolt is the thing that seals, is part of the seal, and so as soon as you pull it out, the water is in that housing and it's going to drain, so you need a pan underneath there. So we'll take these last 2 out, and that water pump is going to a lot of times be really stuck, frozen on there just because it's been on there so long, so you're going to have to probably end up tapping a little bit. We'll see. So what I'm going to have to do is tap on it a little bit, and you want to be careful. You can't break that housing, but okay, it's starting to come loose now. Fits in there real snug. There. Okay. Now, usually you have to scrape these. Once you get that pump off, there's usually part of the gasket that'll stay there. So you have to scrape them clean in order to get it to seal. I usually just take a razor blade and clean them up a bit. And the same on all sides, all around it. You just have to keep doing it a while until you get it right, and then make sure you don't have any particles inside the housing there. It is a real snug fit inside that housing. Now in the instructions for this water pump it says not to use any liquid gasket sealer. Well, I never use liquid gasket sealer, but my favorite kind is Permatex number 1 or number 2 depending upon the application. In this I'm using Permatex number 1. It's great stuff and I use it all the time. So this thing will only go on there one way. So you put the gasket on there, and then there's a notch that has to be lined up right there with one of these bolt holes that goes right there. It's on the housing, so it only goes in there one way, and so it just goes back, and it's real simple. Goes in there, and we'll get them all started and then cinch them down. Usually what I do is put 2 of them in there, get it lined up, and I just put a little gasket sealer on those too, because they're going through that hollow tube, and you need those to seal up. I should say, you see the bolts stick all the way through that housing, and so if you put a little gasket sealer on there, you'll make sure that you don't get any seepage around those threads, because the water is around those threads. So I want to get 2 of them kind of tight and make sure the thing is not binding up in any way. Then I'll do the rest of them. Okay, now the last thing, I've got the water pump in there, but just to show you one more thing, in order to get this thing back on here, what I do is I put the bottom bolt on and just barely get it started. And now all 4 holes are aligned, of course. And in order to put this bolt in there, you'll find it's in a real tight spot. So what I do is I take a pair of needle nose and I push it in there with a pair of needle nose, and I'll show you by doing another one in a minute. And then I put some tension on it with this screwdriver from the back, and then simultaneous with the tension, that's how I get it started. So I have to kind of pry it from the back to put tension on it to get it started. Once I get it started, everything else is easy after that. So let me snug this one up just a little bit, and then I'll show you, demonstrate on another one. Okay, so let's say I wanted to put that top one on right there. So get these bolts out of the way. By the way, we forgot to mention one thing while we had this thing off. If you ever want to take that viscous coupling out of there and replace the fan blade itself, you have to take it off, just like I did. And then if you take those 4 bolts out, that viscous coupling, that thing, comes right out of there, and that's how you would replace the fan blades if you ever broke one of them. So what I do is I put it in there like that with a pair of needle nose with a screwdriver handy, and so you're gonna insert it like that. And about the only way I've ever found is, the easiest way anyway, is to take a screwdriver and put behind it so that I put some tension on it like that. So I'm kind of prying it toward the middle, and I, just with a light touch, I can get the bolt to start. You can't get your fingers in there. Mercedes made this for little people, or people with little fingers anyway. So I got it started. Other than that, it's just a matter of putting these 4 on, putting the fan belt back, tightening them up in reverse sequence, and of course putting the radiator and the air cleaner back on. So we will leave the balance as an exercise for the mechanic.